problems as well as improved cognitive performance and just general improved functional ability and so forth. And the effect sizes are like this. So you've got control conditions are all down around 0.1 and less for improvement over time. Executive functioning, you're up about 0.7. Controlled cognition, which I forget what they were talking about there, and spatial rotation, you're around 0.4. Speed and tasks, like 0.2 kind of range. So pretty good range of exercises for aerobic exercise. Strength training plays a role in some things. Aerobic exercise plays the clearest and largest amount of evidence. So overall, I can't tell you how much it pains me as a psychologist to have to say this. But the evidence for preserving cognitive abilities is much better for physical exercise than it is for cognitive and psychological interventions. The effect sizes are larger, more consistent.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
The effects for interventions that are going to preserve your mental abilities as you get older, the evidence is much stronger for physical exercise
than it is
or cognitive interventions or any other kind of psychological intervention.
For that, have they looked at the types of activities that people are doing, though? Because for a lot of activities, you have to think a lot while you're doing them. Like if you're snow skiing, you have to think about what's ahead of you, whereas
this is
Like
jogging, walking.
well, you also have to look for obstacles and dogs.
Most people are doing this on treadmills.
Oh, okay.
I ran a lot of these subjects.
How was it?
Kramer was my undergrad advisor,
Oh, yeah?
so
Oh,
it was
good.
like taking them to the campus rec center,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, good.
doing some walking,
It's a very controlled environment then.
getting their heart rates up a little bit.
Gotcha.
They're not doing it.
And it's usually not terribly strenuous exercise.
No, we don't want to kill them.
You're taking people from like doing nothing to doing something.
You can get a pretty drastic increase in ability, period, and health with just a little. You don't have to sprint all the time.
I mean, so some of the original stuff when they were just doing, not the intervention literature, but just the kind of social science observation literature, a lot of times the cut points were between like no activity and an hour of activity, physical activity a week. We're not talking about exercise regimens, physical.
A lot of it too is like social interaction because they did it in groups. And when I was leaving the lab, actually, they were running the study where they did the same kind of thing. It was like an aerobic exercise group and a strength training group, and then they tried to do like a no physical activity control. This was they're having people run this at a nursing home. So they picked like a book club for these people to participate in, and the people who were running the study, we found out later, picked a book on physical activity for these people to read in the control group. So that was great.
Yeah, you always have to make sure that people are actually doing the intervention.
Yeah, we had we went in and trained like the staff to kind of run the study for us, and we let them pick the book.
Is it really just as simple as just the benefits of like an increased vasculature in your brain? Is that kind of what people are saying? Or?
Getting your heart and respiratory rate up, getting more oxygen up there, jogging you out of lethargy.
So but that's really what people are. That's really the one thing that's coming out is that really is just blood flow, nutrients getting up there, oxygen.
And it probably is like towards the bottom end of the distribution. It's probably in some ways it's probably like jogging people out of the really bad effects of no exercise whatsoever. As much as it is. I mean, there is some alliterative component more. Up to a point, some more is better. But a lot of the effect is couches, walking around the block a few times.
But it is linear even for the people that are, say, jogging to, like, you know, pretty
I don't know this linear all the way up. I'm thinking it's lower, and you get a little. Something is better than nothing. A little more is better than something.
And at one point, you know, you're not going to have Superman that's like...
I don't know that running the marathon is necessarily going to make it genius.
Yeah.
Oh, no. But it makes sense because 30 years ago, I remember when all these elders in my life, as soon as someone would break a hip, that was like kind of the beginning of the end. And that had a lot to do with their mobility, which has a lot to do with the circulation and the whole thing, too.
Well, yeah, I don't, you guys probably, most of you aren't old enough to remember this at all, but when I was young, whenever anything went wrong, the answer was rest. And so they kept people in bed after illnesses,
giving birth
after
to
you
babies.
broke something, you know, just for anything. They put you in the hospital and they kept you on bed rest. And people were like, you know, physical exercise was bad for you. And Viren was reminiscing about this at his 90th birthday celebration a year or two ago, about, you know, how much that's changed. That used to be like a cardinal principle of medicine, that you know, people were in trouble because they were too active, and you had to stop them.
Secret Garden, the young rich kid, he's in bed.
Yeah. So
It's because the doctors.
this is like a huge change, and it's a change that probably still affects a few surviving cohorts. Although I think people's minds have mostly changed over time, and if it's a rehab therapist or whatnot. The stuff with heart disease is permeated in so much that it's been so effective. But yeah.
Didn't Dr. Finch write something on sort of wear and tear, though? Like, in certain cases, like being so physically active, like you're creating more inflammation that later on leads to.
Well, you have to think about the wear and tear components of it. Partly at my doctor's suggestion, I shifted several years ago, maybe almost a decade ago now, from jogging to doing the bike ride to nowhere because of big arthritis and continuing to jog on pavement was big arthritis worse. One of my first, I've had this experience vicarious with the clients a number of times, but as soon as he told me what the pains when I was jogging were coming from, I looked at him and I said, "It's not getting better, is it?" And there are things you can do to slow down how much worse it gets, and stopping jogging is one of them. You know, so you've got to think about like switching to lower impact.
There's also a trade-off there, then, because you also lose bone mass. At that point, you're not going to have the constant impact and all the pressure that you would normally have to
Well, you
lift.
can do strength training.
You have
That's
to
not,
lift, yeah.
not high impact. But it tries to go, but you do have to think that all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Doing. And, you know, as Eileen Crimmins used to say, as the boomer generation started showing some of these effects, you know, if the trade-off is bad knees and hips versus a bad heart, it's a whole lot easier to do a hip replacement than it is to do a heart replacement. You're still kind of sharing. A little bit in their paper on social engagement, it turns out that depending on what you're looking at, and just in general, you know, the whole social support, social engagement construct and the measurement of it is so diverse across studies, it creates problems everywhere. But their sense of the separation in the Herzog et al. Monograph is that actual engagement in the sense of social activities, volunteer activities, participating in social group activities outside the home, and frequency of actual contact with friends and family does seem to have some relationship to preserving cognitive enrichment. I think they ended up concluding that the effects of network size per se were unclear. It seemed to me that the evidence that they actually summarized suggested that it didn't have any effects. Like in the health psych literature, for women especially, like larger social networks are often related to poor health and higher levels of stress. So it's a mixed bag, just on network size. Actual reported loneliness.